there are many believers who go by the book, meaning the good book, the Bible, Old and New Testament. There's a huge cultural impartation from the Jewish community here that their book is, of course,
Old Testament,
they don't
Torah.
refer it to as the Old
Torah.
Testament, the Torah.
Yeah.
So the Torah is a book that people go by here, and they do so stridently and in an orthodox way. And so when it comes to the Old and New Testament, we have the High Church, which is Catholic, Episcopal, Anglican. We have the Low Church, which is uh, most of the population here are
Southern
Baptist,
yeah.
Methodist,
maybe
Lutheran, Presbyterian.
Yeah.
So that's the Low Church, and then we have a smattering of glass and steel buildings and storefront fellowships that are the parachurch, the charismatic church, the non-denominational, interdenominational body of believers. And again, the numbers are super soft. I've never worked out I'm endeavoring to actually get a demographic understanding about the proportions of these different belief groups, but um, forgive me if I'm wrong, but there's no mosque in Marshall, is there?
No. Or Longview. I
think there's one in Longview. There's
there?
at least a Islamic association there, so there's.
Ah.
I think there's
Maybe
one.
I should check it out. I know there's one. The closest one that I thought was here was in Shreveport.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would love to visit Shreveport and to get my finger on the pulse of that culture, because I think as we grow and become more dynamic, some of the trends will go in the direction that Shreveport has already demonstrated. The likelihood of trends going. I mean, I feel as though the trends are going in a good direction for Marshall. I know that we remain on the precipice of the Handmaid's Tale.
Yes. Very much so. And
that dynamic tension isn't diminishing, it's increasing. So I don't know how to gauge that trend. But we actually have a fellowship here in Marshall that have long-standing custom of handmaids, which means they have women who live and work in their home in exchange for the prospect of an arranged marriage. And it's real. It's not fiction, and it's not a dystopian near future. It actually happens.
Well, what was the name of the author of Handmaids?
Margaret Atwood.
Yeah, I don't believe. I mean, that she pulled it out of thin air.
No.
Yeah.
I believe that it's maybe a lived experience that she thought, what if it went to the extreme?
Take the scale it up,
right.
Yes,
scale
or
it up, make it more profound.
Yes, and what if the government fell in line with what was believed in this small, wherever community she found this culture in? I'm pretty sure. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that what she might have thought?
I mean, we'd have to ask her, but I mean, it's a good supposition on how she came across the idea and developed it.
Yeah. Does it surprise you to know that there's one here locally in Marshall, Texas?
No.
Again, it's one of the reasons I felt like I had to leave. I had to go get cross-pollinated and individuate myself in liberal cultures, not in a static conservative culture.
Yeah.
I pushed the envelope for so long that it snapped back in my face, and then I started seeking out safe harbor where people go by the book. And you can expect and understand and know where people are coming from. And so I was happy to come back to Marshall
we're glad to have you.
Thanks. For my own comfort. But you also have been pushing the envelope on multiple continents since you were young. Can you tell me what that was like for you to be a Palestinian who left your homeland in youth?
Well, it was okay. So I am Palestinian through the lineage of my parents and their parents and their parents. I never lived in Palestine. I personally was born in Kuwait. My father was a refugee from 1948 from Palestine. He was just a child at the time. He was a baby.
What happened in 1948 that caused him to?
The so the so the story goes pretty far back. I mean, it started in the 1800s. The Zionist movement it was in its infancy at the time. The, I don't know if that was always, for the last 2,000 years, that was always the thought that we need to control politics in order to go back to Israel. I don't know if that's what the Jewish community was thinking or the Zionist movement. I don't know how long back, but it really started flourishing and becoming into written
Dominant.
history
Mm.
and becoming a part of written history in the mid to late 1800s.
Okay.
So they used the uh, political contacts that they had to create a Zionist movement, starting in the 1900s, to send small communities of Jewish people to Palestine, which was the Ottoman Empire at the time, um, in order to build settlements, but not controlled by them, but under the laws of the current, owners, nation, the Ottoman Empire at the time. And there, it was fine. I mean, at the
Did they
time,
call them kibbutz at the time, or did
I
that
don't know.
name?
I don't know if they called them kibbutz, but it wasn't as though um, uh, they weren't isolated.
I see.
They would come, just like coming into Marshall. We you don't the Mexicans or the African Americans or the British. They don't. If they move here, they don't take an area of Marshall to move into. They buy a house within a community of people. And that's what they did. They would buy property, or they would settle land that wasn't populated, or there'd be empty homes. At the time, ownership was uh, passed down through generations. If you lived in a home, it was owned by your ancestors. The Palestinian had a home. It had been that land, that property had been theirs for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they were fine with that. If there was a loss of families down, a mile down, they didn't go and just claim it as theirs or sell it. It would sit empty, because Palestinians tend to stay on their land, on their property. So if you had kids, if you got married, you were going to build an extension of your home or another home on the same property. So it's not the idea of buying other people's property wasn't really a big thing like it is nowadays everywhere. Your neighbor dies and he doesn't have heirs, the house is probably sold in a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
But over there, that happens, that property is just left. So there was a lot of abandoned properties and abandoned areas that they were welcome to have settlers in there. Jewish, Muslim, Christian, didn't really matter. Everybody was neighbors. And when after the Holocaust, they moved en masse to Palestine. They were the Zionist movement decided this is the only way we're going to be safe in the entire world. There was nowhere in the world that we were safe because of what happened in Europe, which I can understand, the thinking behind, 6 million of us just died and we need to be safe. I get that. So they moved en masse to Palestine, and there's even photos of the ships with Palestinians, holding up "Welcome, you're safe now" signs, just like the Ukrainian refugees that were accepted all over Europe, just like the Syrian refugees, just like any refugee that goes to a land that accepts them, is going to love them, is going to take care of them.